You know, God's story didn't end with the cross. Matthew 28:6 says, "He is not here, for he has risen." Today, outside the walls of the old city of Jerusalem, lies the most famous grave in the world, affectionately known as the Empty Tomb. It cast a majestic calm over the area where some 2,000 years ago Jesus was buried after paying the price to redeem our souls. Better yet, 3 days later, our Lord and Savior was resurrected from this very spot. To commemorate this special place on earth, an elegant yet most unusual pendant has been commissioned for Compass International. Because of its unique design, wearing it for casual wear or dress up not only looks awesome, but also draws interest and curiosity, giving you the delightful opportunity to explain why the tomb is empty and why the resurrection of Jesus Christ is so vital to our faith. He's alive. Several sizes and price options give you great choices for both casual wear or dress up. Prices start at $19.95 for silver, $350 for gold. For a catalog, more information, or to order, call Compass 800-977-2177 or on the web at www.compass.org. People like Madonna and Mick Jagger will wear a cross, but only a believer will wear the resurrection. Order this incredible gift today. 800-977-2177 or www.compass.org. The following Stealing the Mind Bible Conference presentation is by Mike Riddle and is entitled, Why Apemen Never Shaved. For a free catalog of all of our Bible study DVDs, CDs, audio tapes, and books, call Compass at 1-800-977-2177 or on the web at compass.org.
How many of you here have never heard of answers in Genesis? Okay, are you repenting? Okay, how many know we're building a museum? $25 million, over 50,000 square feet, will open next May, based on the real history of the world called the Bible. So you have to see that. We have free literature out there. Notice I said free literature. You can pick up on all that. But I want to talk about why Apemen never shaved. And I want to start off with some good news. I have some very, very, very good news for you. That is not your ancestor. Well, that ends the talk. Well, let's go a little further. What the Bible does teach. Okay, there's an awful lot of people out there trying to put evolution in the Bible, but let's see what the Bible has to teach. The Bible teaches that God created man, and it starts off, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him male and female. That makes it pretty clear right there. God created man and woman. Nowhere does it say the word evolved. But you know, evolution begins with the assumption that man has evolved from ape-like creatures and we were not created in his image and likeness. So pick your relative. Some of you may have relatives that do look like that, but doesn't mean they evolved. But you know, one of the problems is, I call this robbery. How many of you, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you sitting there right now want to be robbed? Wow, nobody. That's a good sign. Because you know what's going to happen? There's going to be people that are going to try and rob you. Especially you high school students that might be here. You're going to get robbed. There are going to be people trying to rob you every day when you go to college. Now, I'm not talking about financial robbery. What I'm talking about is spiritual and intellectual robbery. There's going to be people that are going to try and rob you of your belief in a creator God, rob you of your spiritual identity to God, rob you and say you're not created in the image and likeness of God, you're not fearfully and wonderfully made, and they're going to rob you of good science. And the press is trying to do that, the media is trying to do that, and college professors are trying to do that. I don't want you to be robbed, and neither do you. We don't want the next generation to be robbed either. So I'm here to prepare you on a little journey to help you from being robbed, so that we can take this next generation and not lose it. So, I want to make this statement. You know, there's an awful lot of people sitting in churches. And you may have sat next to some of these people. They're going to try and rob you. People sitting right there in church are going to try and rob you of a creator God. They're going to try and rob you of your good science. And they're going to say, God used evolution. There's an awful lot of churches out there doing that today. God used evolution. I'm here to tell you he did not. Oh, but he could have used evolution. Yes, he could have, but that's not the point. The point is, what did he do? Not what he could have done. And the Bible's very clear on this. He created us in his image and likeness. He did not use evolution. Don't let people in the church rob you. School textbooks are going to try and rob our children. People say, oh, they're not really teaching this as a fact. Yes, they are. They're absolutely teaching evolution as a fact. Now, see if you see anything wrong in this statement from a modern biology textbook. But all researchers agree on certain basic facts. We know, for example, that humans evolved from ancestors we share with other living primates such as chimpanzees and apes. Any wrong or fuzzy words in there? Now, this is a direct quote from a textbook. Notice the first word, all. All researchers do not agree with this. There are literally thousands of PhD scientists today that do not agree with evolution. And then facts. I'm going to show you that you're not going to get robbed here. I'm going to show you there are no facts. Zero facts of evolution. Zero. So let's take a look at their facts. I want to show you a history of the facts of evolution. Because when somebody breaks your trust, and they repeatedly break your trust, it's pretty hard to get that trust back, isn't it? Well, let's look at what they've done with our trust. First one, Piltdown Man. What they found, lower segment of an ape-like jaw and a segment of a human skull. Just those fragments is all that was found. Now, here's what they had. Discovered in 1912, Piltdown, England. Hence its name, Piltdown. Portion of human skull, portion of an ape-like jaw, claimed it was 500,000 years old. Now, wait a minute. Back in the early 1900s, we didn't have any radioisotope dating. How did they know it was 500,000 years old then? We ever stop to think about that? We didn't have any forms of dating other than we found in this dirt layer. It must be that old. That's the only dating method we have. So let's look at that. New York Times, one of the most prestigious and honest newspapers in the country. Darwin theory proved true. Notice it right there. Darwin theory proved true. Featured in textbooks and encyclopedias for over 50 years as the fact of evolution. 1953, though, several scientists went to look at the actual bones. The problem, after they looked at the bones, something amazing was discovered about this fact of evolution. The bones have been chemically stained to make them appear old, and the teeth had file marks on to make them fit properly. Anybody that actually looked at these bones, you could very easily see the file marks, but nobody wanted to say anything because they wanted everybody to believe in evolution. What had happened, somebody was pulling a prank. Chemically stained the bones, filed these teeth down to make them all fit together, part ape, part human, buried them out there. Somebody came along, found them, said, oh, I've got the intermediate link. We have evolution. And the truth was, it was only about 600 years old, not 500,000 years. What does that do to your confidence in the dating reports from evolution right there? We're only about 500,000 years off, aren't we? Well, let's look at another one. Nebraska Man. Anybody know where we found Nebraska Man? Right. See how easy this anthropology stuff is now? This is easy. Nebraska Man. Found in 1922. Fossil evidence. They wanted to use this in the famous monkey trial, Scopes trials. Claimed it was 1 million years old. Again, we didn't have any radioisotope dating methods back then. It's just we found it in this layer. We want it to be this old. Now, they must have found an awful lot of Nebraska Man. Awful lot. Because at the University of Nebraska, there they had the complete Nebraska Man, his wife, his family, and the entire environment he lived in. A tremendous amount of fossil evidence. Well, when they found the rest, what actually they found to support all this was a tooth. Can you imagine that? From a tooth, they built Nebraska Man, his wife, his family, and the environment he lived in. There it was, Lincoln, Nebraska, University of Nebraska. And when they found the rest of the bones, they found out it was not an ape tooth, not a human tooth. It was a pig's tooth. It was the first time a pig ever made a monkey out of a man. Now, make this next statement. I've made this next statement everywhere except at University of Nebraska. I happen to be teaching there. And some of the football players were out there, and they are bigger than me, so you have to be careful. So I made this statement. Now, you have to know something about spelling. If you don't, you can go put it in your spell checker. If this is what they're teaching at the University of Nebraska, the fact of Nebraska man, when all they found was a pig's tooth, then what does the N stand for on their football helmets? Knowledge. I hope we don't have any Nebraskaites here. No, some of those football players didn't figure that out. Nebraska man. Well, let's go to Ramapithecus. Again, the whole dating was wrong. It was only several hundred years old, so just an extinct pig's tooth. Now, Ramapithecus, found in the 1930s. What they found was this right here, part of a jawbone. That's all they found, part of a jawbone. And this is what they drew and put in the textbooks. Does that sound like good science to anybody? No. See, people are trying to rob you of your science. They're trying to rob you of your science. And they're trying to rob you of your belief in a creator God and who he is. They're trying to take that away from you, and they're trying to take it away from our children, folks. We need to make sure that next generation is prepared. You don't want your children robbed, do you? That means it's our job to make sure they're trained. What they drew. Time magazine. Now, notice the date on here. The date is very important. 1977. I want you to remember that date, 1977. Time magazine wrote an article, said this: Ramapithecus is ideally structured to be an ancestor of hominids. That's one of us. If he isn't, we don't have anything that is. Notice how strong they made that statement. Ramapithecus is not an intermediate link. We don't have anything. 1977. The claim, Ramapithecus was 14 million years old. The truth. Now remember that date, 1977. In 1970, a baboon living in Ethiopia was discovered, had the exact same dental and jaw structure as Ramapithecus. Ramapithecus was therefore dropped from the whole line in 1970 because that creature's still living today. But in 1977, Time magazine wrote an article saying it is still the intermediate link. See how far out of touch the media is in the press. You see, it's evolution at all cost. Evidence does not matter. They want to rob you. And they want to rob your children. So 100 years of evolution facts, there's just 3 of them. Piltdown Man, Nebraska Man, Ramapithecus. We can go through more and more. But let's look at their facts today now. Those are in the history. Now let's look at some of their current facts. Let's look at Neanderthals and Lucy. In other words, today we're going to not only look at ape men, we're going to look at those hairy ape women too. So let's start with Neanderthals. I want to do 3 things about Neanderthals. I want to look at their characteristics. I want to look at a little bit of their anatomy and something about population statistics. So there's your original drawing of Neanderthal. Notice how they drew this. This is what hit the press. Hair all over it, stooped over, making it look part ape, part human. Now the question is, when we find these bones, do we find any hair? No, we don't. Do we find eyeballs? No. Noses? No. How did they know to draw this? They didn't. They went to an artist and said, draw this, and put it in the textbooks. They're robbing our children. First found in Dusseldorf, Germany, in the Neander Valley, hence their name, Neanderthals, 1856. Constructed to look very ape-like. Brain capacity. Now, here's one of the things evolutionists used to use. Some of them still use it. The larger the brain capacity, the more you have evolved, until guess what? We got to Neanderthals, and on the average, they have a bigger brain capacity than we do by about 200 cubic centimeters. Guess what they don't talk about anymore? Science. Now, Neanderthals, the original construction, very ape-like. After many, many years, some medical anatomists went in to look at these bones. And what they found out, whoever put these bones together, put them together all wrong. They put them together based on a belief in evolution, not science. And when they took these bones apart and put them back together again, what they noticed was Neanderthals looked just like us. The whole thing was done to support evolution, not science. We've been robbed. Our children have been robbed. Now, some of the things we know about Neanderthals, they used jewelry. They made jewelry. Apes don't do that. They used musical instruments. Apes don't do that either. They don't make flutes and musical instruments. They did cave paintings. They're capable of speech. Only humans, we're the only species on this planet capable of full speech. Other animals can mimic sounds, make grunts and groans, kind of like before you've had that first cup of coffee. But only humans have all the anatomy capable of full speech, and we have discovered that same anatomy in the Neanderthals, capable of full speech. They even buried their dead. That's a very modern human thing. And they buried a lot of their dead in caves. A lot of their dead were buried in caves. Does that mean they're very archaic, evolving creature? No, it doesn't. It shows a sign of intelligence. Because think of this. If you buried your dead out there in the open, the elements could wash it away. Or if you burned them out in the open, some people could pick up the markers and take them away. So you'd lose the gravesite. But when was the last time any of you picked up a cave and took it somewhere? See, it's a very intelligent thing to do, bury your dead in caves. Where did Abraham bury Sarah? In a cave. These people were very, very smart. Now, one of the things they talk about in Neanderthals when they try and rob our students is they have this brow ridge out here. This brow ridge juts out a little bit, more than normal. They must be evolving. No, not really. I've seen people today with this brow ridge sticking out, some about 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch. These people don't even need umbrellas. But see, this brow ridge sticking out has nothing to do with evolution. It can happen in multiple different ways. One way it can happen to do the way you chew, causing compress, pushing this bone out here. Or it can have to do with living to be a very old age, maybe 100, 150, 200 years old. Because one of the things we do note is your facial bones throughout your lifetime continue to thicken. They continue to thicken. So if you take a picture of when you're 16 and take a picture of when you're 60, you're going to find out you have a fatter head and there's nothing you can do about it. So if you live to be 200 years old, this brow ridge might start jutting out some. And we note that after the flood, some people were still living several hundred years. So there's a good possibility the Neanderthals were nothing more than people that lived after the flood, an isolated population of people. We also notice about Neanderthals a characteristic, not all, but a characteristic of shorter extremities, shorter arms and legs, stocky body build. Does that mean they're evolving? No, it has nothing to do with evolution again. You see, we have people today that look exactly like that. They're called the Inuits, Eskimos. What kind of a climate do they live in? Cold, harsh climate. See, by having shorter arms and shorter legs, it's a protection mechanism. You give off less body heat. You protect yourself in a cold environment. Well, guess where we find most of the Neanderthal bones? In Ice Age Europe. Cold, harsh climate. See, that's called natural selection. We believe in natural selection, happens all the time, but not what Darwin had to say about it. Darwin got natural selection all wrong, as we see happening in our schools today. So Neanderthals, nothing about them we don't see in modern humans. What about human variability? Here's a gentleman, Billy Barty, famous actor, died several years ago, 3'9". Was he a human being? Yes, he was. He was a human being, 100%. Then we have Shaquille O'Neal, 7'1". Is he a human being? Yes, he is. He's a big one, but he's a human being. Notice the tremendous variability within human species. Think about this, though. If you were to find these two bones next to each other, some people might call this two different species, just because of the variability. See, we need to take into account that God has programmed into every species the capability to be variable, but not become something else. Then we look at gorillas. Here's a male gorilla skull. Look at that shape. But then look at the female gorilla skull. Look at the difference. Some people, if you didn't know the difference, you'd call that two different species if you believe in evolution, but it's not. They're both gorillas. Genetic variability within kind. God has programmed that into us. Then we go to population growth rates. Just look at the population today. It's over 6 billion. Over 6 billion. Think of this now. The common dates for Neanderthals. Predominantly, they were around about 130,000 years to about 30,000 years ago. They were around before then, but the major dates for Neanderthals, 130,000 to 30,000 years ago. That's about 100,000 years, isn't it? 100,000 years. That's about 4,000 generations of Neanderthals living during that time. Let's think about this now. Let's put a little logic to this. From the year 1 to the year 2000, about 2,000 years, about 100 generations, we've increased the population from about 300 million to over 6 billion in just 2,000 years. And that includes wars and everything else that happened in there. Neanderthals. Now remember, 100,000 years, not 2,000 years, but they were living on this planet for 100,000 years. Not 100 generations, but about 4,000 generations. During that time, there should have been easily over 50 billion Neanderthals that lived. Where are the bones? Those are some of the most conservative population growth rates, 50 billion. Everywhere you go in Europe, you should be stepping on Neanderthal bones. Oh, but Mike, they decayed away. No, wait a minute. Neanderthals buried their dead, and they buried them with artifacts. And folks, if we can find these dinosaur bones that are allegedly 65 million years old, then we should be finding Neanderthal bones that are only thousands of years old. I'd like to know where the bones are. Or maybe they're not that old at all. See, when you put the numbers to it, the evolution model fails the test. So, conclusion on Neanderthals. Protruding brow ridge has nothing to do with evolution. Stocky body build has nothing to do with evolution. What we believe they were is an isolated population of people that lived in a cold, harsh climate during the Ice Age, 100% human. There's nothing about Neanderthals that is evolution. Everything we find in Neanderthal anatomy, we find in human beings today. So now, let's turn our attention to the ape women. Lucy and the Australopithecines. Australopithecine meaning southern ape. Southern Pithecine ape. We find them in South Africa. I'm going to use the word Lucy most of the time because that's easier to say than Australopithecine. Well, let's start here, Lucy. Two things we need to find out. What was found, and did Lucy walk upright? Those are two key parts here. Because see, the evolutionists need some creature. They must find some creature that went from walking on fours to walking upright on two legs comfortably. And they claim that creature is Lucy. And just to make sure, Lucy is our ancestor. There's the book they use in many universities. Lucy, The Beginnings of Humankind. They're absolutely teaching as Lucy as our ancestor. Now, take a look at this. Here's a picture you can take out of books. Artist conception. Notice this is an artist conception because we don't find the hair, we don't find noses, we don't find eyeballs. But I want you to notice something about this picture drawn by an artist. Note the contemplative gaze, the use of tools, the human hands, the human-like hands there, kind of staring off as if it's contemplating all the mathematics of Einstein. I want to make sure you understand something. That is not what we found. That is put in there by the evolutionists to portray evolution, not science. Our children are being robbed. They're being robbed. Now, what was found? Well, Lucy was found in 1974. About 40% of this fossil was found. That is a lot of fossil, 40%. Claimed it was about 3.5 million years old and claimed it was bipedal. Now, is anybody here bipedal? I got a few of you. Okay, do you still want to sit next to those people that are bipedal? Well, if you're not bipedal, that means you are a quadruped. You're walking around on all fours. Now, I know some of you continue to do that until you've had that first cup of coffee. But that's another lecture. See, bipedal means you walk upright comfortably as your main form of locomotion. How many bipedal here? Some of you, okay, some of you didn't raise your hand. That's okay. Now, Donald Johanson. Why was Lucy so important? I want to show you what this is about here. Why was Lucy so important? Now, here's Donald Johanson. He is the discoverer of Lucy. Here's what he had to say. She had, I knew it, hauled me up from total obscurity into the scientific limelight. You see, that's why Lucy was so important to Donald Johanson. It gave him fame and notoriety and money. Lucy, here's what they found, here's what they draw. That's a pretty big switch. Notice that contemplative look again to give it all these signs of intelligence. That's robbery again. That is trying to rob our students, putting something in there that's not there. Now, Lucy, anybody know how we got the name Lucy out of this creature? Lucy. Why did they call it Lucy? Well, when Donald Johanson found this bone, they found these bones, there happened to be a record playing called, by the Beatles, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds in Her Hair. You find it, you get to name it. I have a very good friend, happens to be a parasitologist. Anybody want to be one of those? Parasitologist, study of parasites. He discovered a brand new parasite. He said, if I found it, I get to name it. He thought he was going to do the right thing. He named this brand new parasite after his wife and found out that was not the right thing to do. Now, how many of you women out there want to be famous because you're named after a parasite? No. Now, I put a circle around Lucy's foot because that's very important here. Number one, we did not find any foot bones for Lucy. We did not find the foot bones. But we have found other foot bones from other Australopithecines. So that's going to be very important as we go through here. Now, let's get to one of the major things. Did Lucy really walk upright? Remember, Lucy's supposed to have been dead for 3.5 million years. They claim it could walk upright. This was the transitional form from being a quadruped, all fours, to walking upright comfortably on 2 legs. In order to determine that, we can look at many parts of the anatomy. I want to look at just 3 of them. I want to look at the rib cage, the pelvic area, and the leg and foot bones. That'll help determine if Lucy could really walk upright. So let's start with the rib cage. There's a marked difference between apes and humans in our rib cage. Humans are very barrel-shaped, very circular barrel-shaped. Apes are very conical in shape. So if you were to find a rib cage, you could tell the difference whether it's an ape or a human. Well, Peter Schmidt, paleontologist at Institute in Zurich, makes this statement. When I started to put the skeleton together, I expected it to look human. Why did he expect it to look human? He believed in evolution. But here's what he goes on to say. But the shape of the rib cage itself was the biggest surprise of all. The human rib cage is barrel-shaped, and I just couldn't get Lucy's ribs to fit this kind of shape. So, right there, Lucy's rib cage was conical, but every textbook I see, guess what the rib cage looks like? Barrel-shaped. They're robbing our students. We can't afford to let our students be robbed. Now, let's look at the pelvic area. There's a marked difference between a human and a chimp pelvic area. In humans, since we walk upright, our pelvic area is more designed this way, straight up and down. But apes, since they're quadrupeds primarily, their pelvic area goes more flat like this. So there's a big difference. If you were to find these pelvic bones, you could determine whether it was an ape or a human. Now, J. Stern and Randall Sussman in the American Journal of Physical Anthropology, both these people are evolutionists, scientists, make this statement. The marked resemblance of Lucy to the chimpanzee is equally obvious. Notice what we just said there? The resemblance of Lucy to chimpanzee is obvious. It suggests to us that the mechanism of lateral pelvic balance during bipedalism was closer to that in apes than in humans. Let's go on with this. Now, I'm going to show you a short video, but I want to lead up to this video. When they found Lucy's pelvic area, and they did find part of the pelvic area, it looked identical to an ape. You just saw that. It looked identical to a chimpanzee's. But the evolutionists couldn't handle that because that meant it could not walk upright on 2 legs comfortably. So here's what they do. They assume that when Lucy died, some animals came over and crushed its pelvic area, and somehow it got fused back together again to make it look ape-like. Now, so what they do is they take Lucy's pelvic area back to the laboratory, saw it apart, and put it back together again to make it look human-like. And that's what the public sees. Anybody really believe that? Okay, let me show you the video. Now, this video was on PBS. And you'll see the evolutionists do this. It's 2 parts here. It's total about a minute long. Watch this video. If you don't believe what I just said, watch it. See what they have to say.
The ape that stood up, it was a revolutionary idea. We needed Owen Lovejoy's expertise again, because the evidence wasn't quite adding up. The knee looked human, but the shape of her hip didn't. Superficially, her hip resembled a chimpanzee's, which meant that Lucy couldn't possibly have walked like a modern human. But Lovejoy noticed something odd about the way the bones had been fossilized.
When I put the 2 parts of the pelvis together that we had, this part of the pelvis has pressed so hard and so completely into this one that it caused it to be broken into a series of individual pieces which were then fused together in later fossilization.
Now, notice how well that fit together? That fit together perfect. Now what I'm going to show you is the rest of this video. What you're going to see, and listen to the buzzsaw in the background, then watch how many holes it has when they put it back together again.
This has caused the 2 bones, in fact, to fit together so well that they're in an anatomically impossible position.
The perfect fit was an illusion that made Lucy's hip bones seem to flare out like a chimp's. But all was not lost. Lovejoy decided he could restore the pelvis to its natural shape. He didn't want to tamper with the original, so he made a copy in plaster. He cut the damaged pieces out and put them back together the way they were before Lucy died. It was a tricky job, but after taking the kink out of the pelvis, it all fit together perfectly, like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. As a result, the angle of the hip looks nothing like a chimp's, but a lot like ours.
I couldn't believe they actually put that on national TV and didn't think anything about it. But, you know, the point here is evidence doesn't matter, does it? See, what you need to understand, this is not an intellectual battle. It's a heart condition. It's a willful rejection of a creator God, and they're out there to rob you and our children. Every textbook you will see has Lucy's pelvic area looking human. You go to the museums today, you'll see a replica of Lucy looking incredibly human. Now, other area, I want to go to the knee joint and the leg bones. Now, human beings, we are knock-kneed. What? He just called me knock-kneed. That's because you are. What that means is your upper leg bone actually slants inward like this. Slants inward. It's at an angle. We call this your carrying angle. It's about a 9-degree angle goes in like this. Well, why do we do that? Are you abnormal? No, that's the way God designed us. You were designed that way to make it so you can walk easier. You see, by having your leg come in like this, when you plant your foot, it's under the center of your gravity. If you didn't have that carrying angle, if both your legs went straight up and down, guess what would have to happen so you wouldn't fall over? You'd walk like this, you'd walk like that, and like that, and like that. Now, who walks like that? Apes and football players. I do have to be careful. I had a couple of professional football players in the audience one time. But see, apes walk like this when they try and walk upright because they predominantly don't have a carrying angle. So we have one so we can walk straight line. If you ever watch a runner in sand and watch their footprints and see the footprints left, it's a straight line. That's because we have that carrying angle. And Lucy had a very high carrying angle, even higher than humans. Therefore, they say Lucy must be evolving. But see, that's not critical thinking. They're leaving out science. They're robbing our students of the ability to do good, logical, critical thinking. Because the question you need to ask are there any living apes today that have a carrying angle? Because they're not evolving, these apes. Are there any living apes? And yes, there are. The spider monkey and the orangutan both have a carrying angle identical to humans. Why? Because both these apes like to walk out on branches and trees. And you'll see them walking on branches like this. You see, if they didn't have that carrying angle, every time they put their leg down, what would happen? They'd fall off the branch. See, since we have living apes today that have a carrying angle, if we find a fossil that also has a carrying angle, does it mean it's evolving? No, it means it could be just another extinct ape that liked to walk on trees. See, all that's being kept from our youth. They're not being told all the information. They're robbing our students of good science. Now, I want to do a little thing on evidence and critical thinking here. Evolution, evidence, and critical thinking. I'm going to give you a test. Which foot is human? And no fair taking your shoes off. Just to make sure, that is the human one. Although this summer I was in an airport and I saw a lady walking by and I wished I had my camera. It was real close. So that's human. In other words, the human foot and the ape foot are very different. Very, very different. Now, Laetoli footprints. Footprints discovered in 1978 in Laetoli, Tanzania. The footprints were dated at 3.5 million years old. That's interesting. 3.5 million years old. Who made those footprints? Well, according to evolutionists, who was living 3.5 million years ago? Lucy. Now, we did not find Lucy's foot bones, but we have found other Australopithecine foot bones, and in every single case, they look identical to apes. The great toe sticks out like a thumb. You ever notice there's a difference between human beings and apes? You know, we have what? 4 fingers and a thumb, but our thumb can do this, doesn't it? Our thumb can actually move back and forth like this. Why doesn't our thumb stick straight up like the rest of our fingers all the time? Easy. By having our thumb being able to do this, we can pick things up with our hands, and we can swing from trees with our hands too, can't we? But you look at our feet, our great toe always sticks straight forward. Why doesn't our great toe have the ability to stick out like this and do what our thumb does? Because we don't normally swing from trees, and we don't normally pick things up with our feet. I always use the word normally. There can be an exception. But in all apes, their great toe has the ability to do this, because they do what with their feet? They pick things up with their feet, and they swing from trees with their feet. So there's a difference. And in every single Australopithecine foot bone we found, it looks identical to an ape's. So who made these footprints then? It's got to be an Australopithecine, a Lucy-type creature, because humans weren't living back then. Since they're 3.5 million years old, well, let's look at this. Again, here's the difference between ape and human. Here's a close-up of one of those footprints. What does that look like? That looks identical to a human footprint, doesn't it? Is there a problem there for the evolutionist? Humans weren't living 3.5 million years ago. Now, here's Donald Johanson, again, the founder of Lucy, makes this statement. Make no mistake about it, they are like modern human footprints. So the Laetoli footprints are modern human footprints, but that can't be, because humans weren't living then. So let's look at the dilemma for the evolutionists. Footprints are 3.5 million years old. The footprints look human. Humans were not living 3.5 million years ago. Lucy's feet are ape-like. What are they going to do with this contradiction? Let me show you how they get out of this. There's a picture I took out of a textbook of Lucy's foot. What does that look like? That looks 100% identical to human with just a little hair on it. They're robbing our students. That is a fraud right there. Rather than accept the data for what it is, they change the data again to support a philosophy called evolution. In other words, the evolutionists do not want to use the evidence. Here's a replica of Lucy at the St. Louis Museum and Zoo. Went there to get this picture. It's right across from the Darwin replica. Look at that foot there. That is Lucy's foot. It's a hairy, human-like foot, isn't it? It's identical to a human foot with some hair on it. That is not what we found. Every Australopithecine foot looks like an ape. When we went to ask Professor Betsy Schumann, evolutionist expert, and we asked her about this replica in the St. Louis Museum, and she admits that the statue's feet probably are not accurate, but when asked whether the statue should be changed, here was her response: absolutely not. We're being robbed. We're being robbed of a belief in a creator God, and we're being robbed of good science. I want to show you one more thing about Lucy. Here's an actual replica of an Australopithecine skull. Notice, number one, the eyes. See, in humans, our eyes kind of go straight across like that, but apes, they kind of slant back a little bit, have a little bit of a slant. Notice the canine teeth. Apes have very large canine teeth. Everybody's feeling that in your tongue now, aren't you? Check and see where you are in this evolution scheme. I see your mouths moving around. Then notice the slant to the face. In humans, our face goes straight up and down like this. But in apes, they cut from the forehead down to the chin, slants like this. So here's another test you can do. Next time you're by a mirror, turn your face sideways, look out the corner of your eye, and if your face has a slant to it, guess what you could be? That'll keep you away from the mirrors now, won't it? Now, let me show you a drawing of Lucy that I took out of a textbook. Number one, notice the teeth. They don't look anything like what was found. They look identical to human teeth. No large canines at all. Next thing to note is notice the eyes. The eye sockets are really straight across. They're not slanted anymore. And third, notice the slope of the face has been made more human. That is not science at all. That's robbery. That's robbery. And we need to protect this next generation. Somebody's got to get this information to this next generation. So what was Lucy? Nothing more than an extinct ape. And I want to point one more thing out in these pictures. That picture off to the right there is another picture of what they call a Lucy-type creature. There's something wrong with that picture. The eyes are white. Apes do not have white eyes. So there's another little subtle piece of making it look human-like. Subtlety gets in there so easy. That's called robbery. Now, I want to show something new. September 2006. This is pretty current. Guess what they found? Lucy's child. Sounds like a next TV show, doesn't it? Baby Lucy. Science News, September 20th. An extraordinary new human fossil comes to light. Does anybody think you look like that fossil? Anybody have arms to match that? The claim, the lower body very human-like and stood upright and walked on 2 feet. Here we go again, walked upright on 2 feet. And there's an artist's conception of Lucy and her baby. Folks, we didn't find anything like that. We didn't find anything like that, but that's what's going to hit the textbooks. Now, critical thinking. Let's look at this. No one has seen the creature walk. Scientists have seen pygmy chimpanzees walk about 10% of the time. So we see pygmy chimpanzees, about 10% of the time they're walking on 2 legs, but it's not real comfortable for them. They're mainly a quadruped. Therefore, walking upright is not convincing evidence that an ape is becoming human, because some apes do it part of the time today. Maybe Lucy could do it part of the time. Now, what have they found? Fingers they found were very ape-like. See, Lucy's fingers are very long and curved, and that's exactly what they found here. Ours are very straight. Apes have very long, curved fingers. Shoulder blades are gorilla-like. That's what we found on Lucy's child. Neck was short and thick, like a great ape. The long arms are ape-like. And the organ of corti, the balance in the inner ear, is ape-like. Folks, if it looks like an ape, what do you think it is? An ape. There's absolutely nothing in this fossil that resembled a human being. 100% ape-like. But here's what they do. Watch this. The question is whether such features, long arms, indicate climbing or just evolutionary baggage. Notice that. Even though the evidence clearly supports the long arms, they're going to try and make this suggestion. They're going to do this. Identical to ape, evolutionists resort to suggestive statements like evolutionary baggage to confuse people about the true evidence. It has long arms, but that's just left over. They're already evolving into a human being. Folks, that's shades of what? Vestigial organs, that old argument. Previous statements of leftover organs of vestigial organs has been shown and proven to be false. That whole idea is proven to be false. At one time, the evolutionists said we had over 100 different leftover organs in our body, such as the coccyx, your tailbone, folks. Your coccyx is a very important part of your body. It is not left over from having a tail. Your appendix is a very important organ in your body when you're young. It's part of your immune system. Your tonsils, when I was young, they automatically cut your tonsils out. Guess what happened? Diseases came in because tonsils are part of your immune system. All these have been medically and scientifically proven to be useful in the human body and not leftover baggage. So the evolutionists are resorting to their trickery again, trying to rob us. But I want to go to this part here. Mechanism for change. Let's go to a little genetics here, because I know you all like genetics. Is it possible for you, a Lucy-like creature, to really evolve into a human? Well, let's look at this. They use two forms, natural selection and mutations. We're supposed to have a beneficial mutation, then through natural selection, we select just that beneficial mutation and get rid of all the old ones. That's the evolutionist mechanism. Well, natural selection we do believe in. As a creationist, we do believe in natural selection because it is an observable fact. What does it mean? Our ability to adapt to our environment, survival of the fittest. But the question is, can natural selection cause one kind of creature to evolve into another? And the answer is absolutely no. That's where these professors get it all wrong. It cannot do that. See, natural selection only selects from what already exists. It never adds anything new. In order to have evolution, you must add new information to the genome. Natural selection does not do that. It only selects from what's already there. And in most cases, it has been observed to cause a loss of information, never a gain. John Sanford, PhD in genetics, writes this. Selection is never, ever for individual nucleotides. In other words, individual pieces of a gene. The reality is that selection acts on the level of the organism, not on the level of the nucleotide. In other words, if you get a beneficial mutation, there are a few recognized beneficial mutations. The natural selection never selects just for that individual mutation. It never does. That's where these biology professors get it all wrong. It always selects at the whole organ level, the whole group level. And he continues, we now know that human nucleotides exist in large linked clusters or blocks ranging in size from 10,000 to 1 million. These linkage blocks are inherited as a single unit and never break apart. In other words, if you're going to select for that beneficial mutation, you're also going to select for hundreds or thousands of bad ones. And you're going to continue to go downhill. Let's look at mutations. What do we know about them? Well, we know mutations can be detrimental. We know they can be neutral. They can be beneficial. What do we know about detrimental ones? Sickness, death, and disease. You know what we know about dead things? They don't evolve, do they? So no evolution there. What do we know about neutral ones? No change, no evolution there. So here's the last possibility for evolution. Beneficial mutations. And that's what I hear in these classrooms. Oh, beneficial mutation, we have evolution. No, that is scientifically wrong. A beneficial mutation will not cause anything to evolve. Because here's what they're forgetting. It has to be a beneficial mutation that adds new genetic functional information. Then you have to survive. You can have all the beneficial new information. You get hit by a car crossing the street. That's it. You see, you must have a beneficial mutation that adds new functional information and survive and produce more offspring. There's not been one observed evidence of this anywhere. In other words, the whole model of evolution is dead. It requires new information. Evolution cannot do that. Lee Spentner, PhD in physics, MIT, also taught at Johns Hopkins University. But in all the reading I've done in the life sciences literature, I've never found a mutation that added information. Wow. John Sanford again, PhD in genetics. Amazingly, there are still no known mutations which unambiguously create or add information, not even the ones that are considered beneficial. Now here's Royal Truman, PhD in chemistry. It seems fair to point out that evolutionists have yet to provide even a single concrete example of mutation leading to an increase of information as requested. In other words, evolution is dead, folks. It could never have happened. There is absolutely zero evidence to support it. In other words, this whole scene we see in our textbooks is an illusion. It is an absolute illusion. Our children are being robbed today. You don't want to be robbed, you want your children to be robbed. So what do we know scientifically? There's no mechanism for Darwinian change. There are no factual transitional fossils, and the evolution of ape-like creature to human is built on nothing but speculation, not observable science. So why does all this matter? Why does it really matter to the church? Well, here's what we have. It's called the authority of Scripture, folks. What does the Bible teach? We are fearfully and wonderfully made in the image and likeness of God. If you're believing in evolution, you do not believe that statement right there. And then there goes the rest of Scripture. You see, what Jesus had to say in Mark 10, verse 6 makes it very important. Jesus made this statement. But from the beginning of the creation, God made them male and female. Notice that leaves no wiggle room for millions of years of evolution. Jesus Christ just said that at the beginning of creation, man and woman were on this planet. Jesus made that statement. Are you going to deny his words now? If he believes it. And you know what, folks? He was the eyewitness because the Bible teaches he's the creator. That's what makes it important. That's why it should be important to the church. Are we going to follow Jesus or are we going to follow the wisdom of man? Which one are you willing to have? You see, you read the Bible, it gives the genealogies from Adam all the way to Jesus. You know what that means? The Bible says Eve is the mother of all. That means if you're not a descendant from Adam, folks, you're not a human being and you can't be saved. That's why it's important to the church. Do we believe God's word or do we believe man's wisdom? It comes down to that choice. Can we reconcile the Bible with the claims of evolution as many churches are teaching? Absolutely not. You can choose one or the other. You cannot have both. This is where a lot of churches are. They're weak, they've compromised, and tried to be friends with the world. You know what the Bible teaches about those who've been friends with the world? It says you're at war with God. It uses that word enmity, hostility, hatred. Romans uses it. James uses it. Friendship with the world is enmity with God. If you're trying to be friends with the world, you're trying to think like the world, folks, you're at war with God. And I'll make a pretty clear statement. You're going to lose. See, this is where we need to be. We need to build a firm foundation. And that foundation starts in the book of Genesis. In the beginning, God created. Do we accept that or not? You see, we need to build that firm foundation and not let these ideas of humanism, which is another name for evolution, into the church. We need to get the churches back online. We need to make sure our children are not being robbed anymore. It's going on too long. Robbery. We don't want this next generation robbed. Let's go out of here and say, I came here and I'm not going to be robbed anymore. God bless all of you. Let's go to work.
This has been Why Apemen Never Shaved, presented by Mike Riddle. To receive a free catalog of all of our Bible study DVDs, CDs, audio tapes, and books, information on upcoming Bible conferences in your area, or details of our missionary outreach, call 800-977-2177 24 hours a day or on the web at compass.org.